The reading is taken from John chapter 20, beginning at verse 1. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." And Peter and the other disciples set out and went towards the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They've taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she said this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? For whom are you looking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked, for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thanks, Steve. I'm sure that most of us are very familiar with the passage which Steve has just read for us from John's Gospel. Whilst all the Gospels cover the events of that first Easter Sunday, John's version is the longest, it is the most detailed, and it's the most authoritative. And when I say it's the most authoritative, of course, John was the disciple who Jesus loved above all others, and John was the disciple who outran Peter to get to the tomb first. And because of that, he saw everything that happened on that day, and so everything was first-hand from him. And that is why in the lectionary, the John's Gospel version is on every Easter Sunday, and of course it was the version which lamps used in their wonderful portrayal of the Passion at St Andrew's last Sunday. Now it's interesting, I've read through all the other Gospel versions as well. They're not quite so long as that, but it's interesting because there are little differences there and they have different perspectives. And in Matthew's version, we learn that there was an earthquake. And also we learned that the Roman guards were so petrified that they deserted their posts and ran away and reported back to their centurion, and subsequently were bribed to keep the truth of the matter under wraps. And there were two Marys there in Matthew's version. There was Mary Magdalene, who was in all the versions of the Gospel reading, and there was Mary, the mother of Jesus, and there was just one angel, and of course there was the empty tomb. In Mark, there were the two Marys, but they were accompanied by Salome, and there was one angel, and there was the empty tomb. In Luke, we have the two Marys again, with Joanna and with other women, and there were two angels, and there was Peter who came into the empty tomb. And then the one we just heard, where we had Mary Magdalene, Peter and John, who all entered into the empty tomb, and there were two angels. And it's interesting to reflect on all those four Gospels of how various different people reacted to the risen Christ. There was the Roman guards, who I'm pretty sure won't have seen the risen Christ. I think they scarpered and ran away as soon as the angels came. And then there were the 9 other disciples who stayed at home. And even when Peter and John went back, and obviously they knew and loved Jesus, but they did not believe because they hadn't seen. And then there were the people who went to the tomb, looked in, but didn't go in. And they knew Jesus and loved Jesus, and they knew something awfully big had happened, but they didn't know what had happened, and they did not believe because they had not seen. And then finally, there was Mary, John, and Peter, and they went to the tomb, and they went inside the tomb, and they saw, and they believed. And these days, I think the reaction of the people who were there on that eventful day 2,000 years ago is very, very similar. There are a lot of people in the world who are a bit like the Roman soldiers who know very little about Christ, and some of them know nothing about Christ, and he just doesn't figure in their lives at all, and that's very sad. There are other people who know of Jesus, and while some of them will reject him, I think the vast majority just ignore him, and that again is very, very sad as well. And then there are the people who know Jesus and love Jesus and believe in Jesus, but when it comes to the resurrection, they're not quite so sure about that. And then there is the rest, the people like us today who are here to celebrate the most significant, important event that ever happened some 2,000 years ago, when Jesus sacrificed himself on the cross and then was subsequently resurrected. And in doing so, he conquered death, and he opened the gate to glory for everybody who believed in his name. Whilst there are some differences with regard to the gospel readings, there are two things which shine through, and these are both the same sides, different sides of the same coin. There is the empty tomb, and there is the risen Christ. And Mary was the first to see the risen Christ, and she spoke to him, as we heard earlier. But Jesus, as we also heard earlier, did visit the disciples later in an upper room, and he visited them there, and he shared a meal with them. And it was only at that stage that the other disciples believed, because they saw him there. And famously, of course, there were only 10 disciples there, because Thomas wasn't there, and he steadfastly refused to believe because he hadn't seen, until Jesus appeared again to him, and at that stage he saw and he believed. And we can take great comfort in the words which Jesus then said to Thomas, which come later in John, but which we didn't have covered. And let me just read them now. Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have believed." But this is written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him you have life in his name. Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.